The opening scene shows Helen Cutter, a renowned scientist, running through dark streets while being chased by a massive dinosaur-like creature. She hides in a large dumpster, but the creature attacks it, forcing her to escape. Helen then rushes to a nearby store where a boy is cleaning and listening to music through his headphones. Despite her desperate cries, he doesn't let her in, making her flee as the creature continues its pursuit. She tries to find safety in a car park, but the creature throws cars at her. Finally, Helen dashes into the woods, hoping the dense forest will help her evade the creature. The scene shifts 8 years ahead, introducing Professor Nick Cutter, a zoologist, and his lab technician, Stephen Hart. As they head to their office, Connor Temple, one of Nick's students, approaches them with a newspaper about a giant beast sighting. Nick brushes it off, urging Connor to focus on more pressing matters. Connor mentions that Nick's late wife, Helen, would have investigated such reports. Although initially uninterested, Nick's curiosity is piqued when he hears the sighting is in the Forest of Dean. Nick, Connor, and Stephen head to the Forest of Dean to investigate a creature sighting. There, a security guard shows them the damage caused by the predator. Behind a truck, they also notice a crushed metal fence behind the truck, which leads Stephen to recall that Helen investigated a similar sighting in the same area years ago and vanished. At a zoo, zookeeper Abby Maitland is working to get 2 lizards to mate. Her boss, Tim Parker, tells her they need to cut back on the reptile program due to budget cuts, which frustrates her. While Tim takes a phone call, Abby sees a note about a boy, Ben Trent, who found a lizard and wants the zoo to collect it. Abby decides to handle the task herself. Abby visits Ben's house, where he shows her his lizard, Rex. Ben believes Rex, which he found in the forest, might be a Draco volans, but Abby suspects it could be a new species. She asks him to take her to the spot where he found Rex. So, Ben leads Abby in the forest where she notices Rex seems unaccustomed to the cold. There, they also discover a dead cow high up in a tree. They then hear a distant roar, causing Ben to panic and flee in fear, leaving Abby and Rex alone in the forest. At the Forest Dean office, Claudia Brown approaches Nick, seeking his expertise to verify the authenticity of a recent creature sighting. Nick is interested and thinks it might be a wild panther, and invites Claudia to join his team. Outside, Connor shares his database of extinct vertebrates with Stephen just as Nick and Claudia arrive. Together, the 4 of them set out to investigate the sighting. As dusk falls, Abby gets lost in the woods while searching for Ben. She trips and drops Rex, who then flies off and lands in some bushes. Chasing after him, Abby is startled to see a dinosaur-like creature's reflection in a puddle. But the creature soon moves away, leaving Abby astonished. Meanwhile, Ben finds a glowing, rotating fragments in the air that chirp like Rex. He looks through them and sees a desert landscape with flying lizards similar to Rex. Alarmed by nearby roars, Ben runs through the forest calling for Abby, then injures his finger on a fence while fleeing through the forest. The creature tracks his blood and attacks him from the window, then defends himself with toys and objects around him. When he throws a disco ball at the creature, it retreats, causing a mess in his room. In the forest, Abby is still figuring out her way back when she encounters another giant creature. As she panics, Nick and his team joins her asking about Abby. Abby introduces herself to the team. Nick then examines the creature, noting its anapsid features. The team also witnesses Rex, who amazes them. Later, at Ben's house, Nick inspects the damage to Ben's window. Mary, Ben's mother, blames Ben for the damage, despite his explanations about the predator, then asks Abby to discuss the creature she saw in the forest. But she dismisses his claims as fear. Ben then describes a desert landscape he saw through a phenomenon in the forest, capturing Nick's interest. However, the others remain skeptical, and Ben leaves, frustrated. Upon hearing Ben's account, Nick decides to investigate. He plans to scare the creature that Stephen and Connor were guarding. They pursue it and see it vanish into the glowing fragments Ben had discovered. The next morning, the home office secures the forest while Connor examines the phenomenon and detects a strong magnetic field. Simultaneously, Nick confides in Stephen, expressing his belief that Helen may have disappeared into the phenomenon. At the home office, Nick and Abby sign the Official Secrets Act and meet with James Lester, a government official. Nick argues that the anomaly is a time portal linked to millions of years ago, but Lester is skeptical. Frustrated with Lester, Nick insists that he should be investigating the anomaly. He then reveals his intention to enter the anomaly to find Helen, even without official permission. Meanwhile, scientists examine Rex in a lab. Abby criticizes their methods, and when Rex suddenly flies away, creating chaos, Abby and Claudia rush to chase him. They eventually find Rex near an open window. Despite Abby's efforts to lure him with food, Rex initially escapes but soon returns, landing in Abby's arms. Her skillful handling impresses everyone. In the forest, Stephen and Connor are tracking the predator. Stephen quickly discovers a large footprint and calls Connor for identification. Connor identifies it as a gorgonopsid, and urges Steven to act quickly. When Rex's DNA results confirm that it is an extinct creature, Lester agrees to back an exploration mission through the anomaly led by Nick, provided that Nick signs a disclaimer. While Ben is in detention, he spots a Gorgonopsid outside and warns his teacher, who dismisses him. The creature then breaks into the school and stalks the hallways. Ben and his teacher lock themselves in a classroom and barricade the door. Steven eventually locates the Gorgonopsid at the school and distracts the creature by throwing a chair, leading it on a chase through the school. He manages the creature to flee from the school. At the anomaly site, Nick prepares for the mission with Captain Tom Ryan, a soldier, while Claudia warns them to return within 2 hours. Abby hands Rex to Nick before he and Ryan step into the anomaly, emerging in the Permian desert described by Ben. Nick asks Ryan for an hour alone and climbs a hill to call for Helen. Ryan soon finds Nick and leads him to a human ruin and a half-buried skeleton with Helen's initials on a camera case. Nick confirms that the skeleton doesn't belong to Helen. Ryan then insists on returning, but Nick refuses. As they argue, the anomaly flickers, signaling its imminent closure. Reluctantly, Nick agrees to return to avoid causing harm to Ryan. They return just before the anomaly disappears. As everyone questions Nick and Ryan about the other side of anomaly, the Gorgonopsid suddenly makes an attack, causing panic in the team. In the process, Claudia trips, making her vulnerable. Steven distracts the creature with a horn and then shoots it, killing it. The next day, Lester retrieves photos from the anomaly camera, all showing Helen in the desert. Later, while in his office, Nick discovers a living ammonite on his desk. He rushes outside and catches a brief glimpse of Helen on the street, but she vanishes before he can reach her, leaving him deep in thought. Next, a train is suddenly halted inside a tunnel because of signaling problems. Passengers feel the heat and one woman decides to open a window for some fresh air. Unbeknownst to her, a large spider is perched nearby and starts tickling her. When she realizes the spider is behind her, she quickly slams the window shut, accidentally trapping one of its legs in the process. The woman screams in terror at the sight of the giant spider. Meanwhile, Connor tries to tell his friends about the Gorgonopsid, but they don't believe him. Later, while researching, he discovers another anomaly and rushes to Abby to share the news. At Abby's house, he hands her a printout and suggests they investigate it together. Abby proposes informing Nick, but Connor dismisses the idea. Claudia visits Nick, who is reviewing Helen's papers for clues about the anomaly. She informs him that they will keep the situation private, as the public wouldn't believe it. Meanwhile, Abby and Connor are investigating the anomaly on their own and set up camp in the forest for the night. Abby texts Steven about their new search. As Connor falls asleep, their friends play a prank by creating a fake Gorgonopsid to scare them. In Nick's office, Steven tells Nick about Abby and Connor's investigation, prompting Nick and Steven to find them. When they arrive the next morning, Connor and Abby apologize. Nick decides to remove Connor from the team but keeps Abby due to her skills and her discretion in keeping their previous search confidential. Elsewhere, a pest control technician is treating pests on a railway track. After a while, he hears a noise and goes to investigate. Peering into a hole, he sees nothing at first. Suddenly, a giant spider appears right above the hole, and, before he can escape, it lunges at him. The next morning, Nick and Claudia visit the injured pest controller in the hospital. The doctor is puzzled by his wounds, which look like they were caused by an axe or knife, but the real problem is the venom that is threatening his life. Nick notes that the injuries resemble bite marks, but cannot determine his exact condition. The doctor also reveals that the victim mentioned seeing a monster before losing consciousness. Following their visit, Nick and Claudia meet with Lester to press for a shutdown of the specific area affected by the creature. After much discussion, Lester reluctantly agrees to the partial shutdown. Afterward, Claudia and Nick join a special team led by Ryan to investigate the tunnel. Although Nick wants to accompany them, Claudia prevents him from going. Ryan and his team, equipped with rifles and night vision goggles, enter the tunnel and explore a bunker-like area. Suddenly, a giant spider appears and quickly flees from their sight. While searching for it, the team discovers dozens of giant spiders on the ceiling. The spiders begin dropping down, causing panic and gunfire among the soldiers. The shooting drives the spiders away, and the team manages to exit the bunker. Outside, the doctors treat the soldier bitten by the spiders while the others discuss the encounter with Ryan. Ryan describes the spiders and mentions unusual headaches and bright gunfire, which Steven attributes to high oxygen levels. Nick theorizes that a new anomaly with higher oxygen levels is present in the underground, leading to the Carboniferous period rather than the Permian. He requests permission to investigate further, and Claudia agrees, allowing the team to gear up and head down. As they get ready to enter the tunnel, Claudia informs them about the pest controller's death and expresses concerns about Abby's presence. She doubts Abby's suitability for the mission, but Nick argues that Abby's expertise with insects makes her more capable than the entire team. They descend into the tunnel with a powerful flashlight. As they navigate a narrow corridor, Nick spots one of the giant spiders on the floor. When he shines the light on it, the spider quickly retreats, supporting Cutter's theory that they are light sensitive. Moving further, they find many spiders on the ground. While Nick and Steven discuss the situation, Abby notices the anomaly through a damaged chain link and calls Nick over, which surprises the group. However, as Abby bends to pick up her drop torch, she sees something alarming and warns the others. It turns out to be a giant centipede. Nick orders Steven to escort Abby to safety and traps himself to confront the centipede. After a close escape, Nick hears a voice calling his name and tries to follow it. Outside, Steven is prevented by Claudia from re-entering the tunnel to help. Claudia inquires about the creature, but the team does not have any details, prompting her to call Connor back to the team. As Claudia goes to retrieve Connor, Steven secretly enters the tunnel to rescue Nick. Inside the tunnel, Nick follows a mysterious voice but discovers dead ends. Meanwhile, Steven arms himself with a chain and a flamethrower to battle the giant creature. As Steven enters the area, he initially battles the giant creature with the flamethrower, forcing it to retreat temporarily. However, when he moves near the anomaly, it pulls the flamethrower from his grasp, leaving him unarmed. Seizing the opportunity, the creature then attacks him. Outside, Claudia arrives with Connor and is furious upon learning about Steven's actions. Unable to reach Steven, she sends Ryan's team to rescue him. Inside, Steven, now injured and nearly unconscious, sees Helen approach with a torch. Despite his plea for help, Helen does not move, and Steven's vision fades as he collapses. Later, Nick returns and finds Steven on the ground. He quickly helps Steven out of the tunnel. Steven then reveals that Helen is alive and waiting on the other side of the anomaly. He says she urged him to tell Cutter that if he wants to know the truth, he must visit the other side of the anomaly. On the streets, Connor identifies the giant centipede as an arthropleura, noting its keen senses and that it is probably not poisonous. As he speaks, Nick emerges from the tunnel seeking medical help for Steven. The medical team examines Steven and finds that his symptoms match those of the pest controller. Steven is then taken to the hospital in an ambulance, with Abby staying by his side. Steven asks Abby out for dinner, revealing his feelings, but she says she won't discuss it until he is better. At the hospital, the doctor requests a venom sample to develop an antidote. To obtain this, the team returns to the tunnel to search for the arthropleura. Unable to find it in previous locations, they begin to worry they might have lost the creature. Connor then suggests they look for burrow holes, as the creature is known to dig. A while later, they find a large hole and, after some effort, reach a massive room in the tunnel. There, they spot the arthropleura above them. It descends to attack, and Nick moves in to confront it, allowing it to bite his arm. As the team fights the creature, it crashes into a fuse box, getting electrocuted and dying. They collect the venom and head back to save Steven. At the hospital, Steven begins to recover after receiving the antidote. Claudia arrives to question him about seeing Helen, but Steven quickly dismisses it, suggesting he might have been hallucinating. Abby then asks if Steven remembers talking to her in the ambulance, but he does not. Abby decides the matter is not worth pursuing, so she drops the topic. Meanwhile, in the tunnel, Nick sits alone when Connor approaches and asks if the success of the mission will bring him back to the team. Nick acknowledges Connor's good work and gestures to his comeback. After Connor leaves, Nick goes to the anomaly, pondering Helen's whereabouts and her intentions. The scene shifts to a private swimming pool, where a couple is enjoying a swim. After a while, the girl leaves the pool and heads to the changing room, while the boy decides to dive back in. Just as he dives, a marine reptile leaps out of the water, grabs him in midair, and then pulls him back into the pool. The girl hears a loud splash and rushes to see what happened. Through the viewing window, she sees the enormous marine creature splashing against the glass, which terrifies her. At the home office, Nick, Claudia, and Lester are in a meeting with other officials discussing the anomaly. Connor shows a video indicating that the anomaly's magnetic field is stable, implying it isn't weakening like before. Lester is annoyed by Connor's mannerisms and cuts off the video. During the meeting, Nick suggests that anomalies might only temporarily fade, but Lester doubts this idea. While they are talking, an assistant gives Lester a note, which he reads before announcing a possible new anomaly incursion. At the hospital, as Steven is being discharged, Abby and Connor come to pick him up. Abby offers to take him home, but Steven mentions that his girlfriend is coming to pick him up, which upsets Abby. Later, Claudia and Nick rush to the scene of the new anomaly, where they find a girl traumatized by the loss of her boyfriend. The inspector suggests that the girl might have killed her boyfriend and hidden the body, noting her claims about monsters with skepticism. Nick believes the girl is telling the truth and does not want her to be locked up. Claudia reports this to Lester, but he refuses to release the girl. At a reservoir, a giant marine reptile surfaces and reveals the boy's remains, causing panic. The research team arrives and Connor notes the water level drop, indicating the anomaly is still active. Nick and Claudia spot steam in the reservoir, suggesting warm water from the anomaly is mixing with it. They plan to dive in, while Abby and Connor collect water samples. Connor then warns Abby of the marine reptile lurking nearby. Meanwhile, Steven and Nick, along with the professional divers, are swimming through the reservoir when one of the divers accidentally passes through the anomaly. Seeing this, Nick and Steven quickly swim back to the surface. At the same time, the creature encircles Abby and Connor. When it momentarily moves away, they make a dash for the shore. However, the creature soon returns and attempts to attack them. Connor grabs an oar from a nearby boat and uses it to fend off the creature, causing it to retreat into the water. As Nick and Steven return to the water to examine the anomaly, the injured creature swims through it. Nick watches as the anomaly begins to collapse and eventually closes. On shore, Cutter and Connor discuss the creature incursion, with Connor identifying the marine predator as a mosasaur from the Cretaceous period. Claudia then approaches and inquires about the missing diver, to which Nick confirms that the anomaly is now closed. At the home office, Nick explains that the anomaly shifted from the swimming pool to the reservoir due to a temporal fault line. He warns Lester that the anomaly might reopen along this fault line, and recommends securing those areas. However, Lester prefers to believe that the anomaly incursion is over. In a house, a mother is preparing to do laundry while her children play outside. She heads to the basement to load the washing machine, unaware that water is beginning to appear and flow across the floor toward her. After going upstairs, she notices a trail of wet footprints leading from the basement. Returning to the basement, she finds it starting to flood as the water rises and reaches the electrical outlets, causing them to short circuit. At the university, Connor's friends notice his odd behavior while he examines a mosasaur profile. They decide to watch him closely, suspecting he's hiding something. Meanwhile, Steven sees photos of the arthropleura at the home office, recalling his bite and Helen. He questions Nick about why Helen hasn't been mentioned to the team. Nick feels Helen should handle this herself. Their discussion ends quickly, and they leave. At the house, a plumber called to fix a flooding issue, who is soon attacked by a Hesperornis after mistaking the noise for a pet. The team then arrives at the scene. They find the body of the diver who went into the reservoir's anomaly. Claudia is informed about the situation, and the team quickly arrives at the house. They discover a handkerchief with HC written on it. Ryan gives the handkerchief to Claudia, who then brings it to Nick. Nick admits he's struggling to accept that his wife is still alive. Claudia is furious with Nick for not sharing this information sooner, as Helen might hold crucial truths about the anomaly. Later, Lester orders Nick to retrieve Helen from the anomaly, threatening to remove him from the operation if he refuses. Nick agrees, on the condition that he goes alone and Helen won't be forced to return. Claudia is wary, but Lester trusts Nick will comply. Nick then enters the anomaly, finds Helen, and learns she stayed behind to keep the anomaly's secret. She offers him a chance to stay, but he declines. As he heads back, he is attacked by a creature, but manages to return through the anomaly unconscious. Claudia and Lester, against their agreement with Nick, forcibly bring Helen back. Nick watches in shock and betrayal as Helen is taken away, leaving him distraught. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.